specifically with trucks, people are interested in, I saw two common questions. One was, are the Toyota 10-speed transmissions better? And the other one was, what do you think of Nissan's JATCO? It's basically Mercedes licensed 9-speed transmission. Don't know if you know anything about those two, or if you think they're marginally better than the ZF and Ram and the 10-speed in Ford and GM, or what your thoughts are on those.
Yeah, well, here's what I'll tell you. So I'll start with the Mercedes-Benz one, because we've done several of the 722.9 transmissions. And I forget what Nissan is calling it. They usually name transmissions after A-track players, like RE7R01, A. Like, oh, that's a really memorable name. But my point is, that transmission, it's not the worst transmission, but there's a couple of major issues for a consumer. One is that when it does fail, it is very, very expensive. Okay, it's hyper specialized. It's not, a TH400 where you can go to your local trans shop and they'll figure it the hell out. It's not one of those units. You're going to have trouble finding maintenance and repair support on that specific transmission. The second thing I would tell you is, as a function of that, it makes it expensive because people that do perform this sort of labor know that they can charge a premium. This is why it's so expensive to remanufacture a 722.9. It's not because there's so much more in there. It's because nobody else does it, and the parts are a nightmare to get. And all of those things end up being bubblegum in the hair of a manufacturer trying to repair the transmission. So it's not the worst, but it's really difficult to own long term. That's what I would say about that. And it does drive pretty nice. I'll give them that. And remind me of the first question. I'm sorry.
The Toyota 10-speed and the, basically they're putting it in the Tundras, Sequoias, everything. Yeah.
So that transmission, it's made by ASIN. That transmission is very similar to the 6-speed and 8-speed ones that they had. It's a lot of similar intellectual property. They added another gear set and stuff to get you additional gears. But as far as the quality of manufacturing and everything, I would say that it's very similar to earlier years of ASIN transmission, like 2010 to 2020, that whole time frame. I'd say the quality was pretty consistent. They're not perfect, but they're pretty good. Most of the issues with the 10-speed is that you have more parts that have to move more frequently, and so more things will fail out more frequently, even if they're made of the same quality. This is the reason that a V12 is usually less reliable, no matter who makes it, than a V8. The main problem is that there's more moving parts. And V12s actually have the benefit of primary and secondary harmonics canceling out, and they're still usually less reliable. I know, I've had several of them. So it gets a little bit complicated. I think that 4 to 6 speeds is kind of the magic number, but the EPA will not allow those transmissions to continue existing. And so we're getting cucked into owning 10 speeds. I would tell people that the direct shift 10AT, which is the trade name for that 10-speed in the Toyotas that they're using in like the 300 series Land Cruiser and stuff, or the later model 200 series, that is, as far as 10 speeds go, I argue that it's the best one. I think most people would agree with me. It does have some issues. It does have some longevity concerns, but it is significantly better than any offerings from Ford or General Motors at this time, and definitely better than Mercedes. Even though those are not the worst transmissions, they're completely terrible to own. Just look at the owners.
Yeah, well, that'll help people. I know Toyota's caught a lot of flack for their engine problems, but if they get those figured out, then at least that's traditionally been the place that people run is, I have a 6-speed, the old 5.7 Toyota with a 6-speed, and
unbreakable.
It thing drives like brand new at 236,000 miles. So, that's what people want. They just want to be able to change their fluid and maintain it well and just drive the crap out of things. So I did get another, this question was, this question was interesting. I got like 3 questions, the same thing. And actually I had this thought when I was talking to you in the last video, because you were talking about viscosity and how northern transmissions last longer than southern transmissions due to the, cold weather and the viscosity being higher. And people are asking, can they, instead of using this ULV fluid, can they use the older style fluid in these 10-speed transmissions? Can they run Mercon ATF, or is it going to hurt the transmissions just based on the design?
Here's what I'll say. I had a Lincoln Navigator Black Label, one of the extended wheelbase ones, the L's. And we called it the Bang Bus. It was kind of a toy vehicle, had a couple of mods, all that. And I had our 10R80. And I made the decision that I was going to run 6R140 fluid, which is Mercon LV. And I chose to run that because I figured it's only slightly more viscous than the ULV. But I wanted to see what would happen because somebody who I know who designed parts for Ford for several years tried to tell me that if I did that, something bad was going to happen. This kind of proves that they don't know what they're talking about. The transmission doesn't have any way to know what's going to happen if you put LV in there instead of ULV. I just don't buy that. So I did it and everything worked perfectly. Now, as far as the material benefit to that throughout time, I don't know that it's dramatic enough to really justify doing, but at the end of the day, there's more LV being produced than ULV and there's less demand. So if anything, it's at least cheaper. I would argue that if you really wanted to measure, it probably is significantly better long term. It's going to break down less. But I would also say that I think you're splitting hairs. The number one problem in all these Ford and GM 10 speeds is the valve body. That's the entire reason people upgrade them. I try to explain to people, and this is probably bad for your transmission sales, but look, I'm coming up here and being honest with you. If you do a valve body upgrade, the chance that you will ever need a transmission shoots down dramatically. Obviously, nothing is ever zero, but it is a lot closer to zero than if you don't modify the thing. Nearly all catastrophic transmission failures are valve body failures, and the most effective way to prevent that is the billet steel valves, the thicker separator plate, the O-ringed valve where you can do so safely, etc. That's why I designed these parts. The intent is reliability. Again, it probably negates transmission sales, but that's okay. We're here to make parts that work properly, not be Jeff Bezos.
All right, next question. What's your opinion on, and I don't think we touched on this in the last video, which is funny because I'm always telling people just do drain and fills on your transmission, and maybe I'm wrong. I like to 30 to 50,000 miles do a drain and fill, and not the entire thing. I'll do like 3.5 to 4 quarts, whatever comes out in the drain and fill, and I just do that every 30 to 50,000 miles. And I don't even typically do the filters because I don't like pulling the pans if I don't have to. I like doing the most simple, least invasive approach when I'm doing Toyota stuff. What's your recommendation on that?
Well, the best thing you can do, in my own opinion, hot flushes are excellent for coolers, but they can agitate material inside the transmission that's gotten baked into corners and hard to reach areas. And so what ends up happening is sometimes people who try to flush a transmission can trigger something to get stuck or to stop working properly that was on the verge of having an issue, and that pushes it over the edge. So although that's uncommon, it can absolutely happen. So what I tell people to do is your best bet is to establish a regular maintenance schedule that is reasonable for your application and your vehicle. Drain it. I would change the filter, but if not, I mean, look, if you're doing any sort of maintenance, you're already ahead of 80% of people. Okay, drain the filter, or excuse me, drain the pan, replace the filter if applicable, fill it back up, and you're a lot better off than if you did nothing. I would say the more aggressive the use case, the more frequently you should do so. A good rule of thumb is 25, 30,000 miles, but if you exclusively run highway miles, you can go dramatically longer because there's really nothing wearing out. I mean, if you're a hotshot company and you hook up a trailer and you get up into fourth, fifth, sixth gear and put it on cruise control and you go from Maine to California in sixth gear, and then you drop it off and you pick up another one and do it the other way, you have done less wear to that transmission in 3,000 miles both ways than somebody driving from the bottom end of New York City to the top end of New York City in rush hour. So there's a lot of variables, but 25,000 to 30,000 is an excellent rule of thumb for the average person. Competitive applications, spirited driving, high idle time, things like that, maybe do it more frequently. And like I said, freeway miles, commuting applications, maybe do it less, assuming there's not a lot of wear and tear on the car in that commuting environment.
Yeah, that's interesting. I probably, if I own one of these expensive trucks, I don't think I'd be running anything but the spec fluid that they require and putting in your kit. But I think it's pretty, yeah, it's interesting to see the comments in the YouTube videos of how many people have used your kit and vouch for it. I mean, these are people that have put it in long before I was doing videos and they're saying, hey, I haven't had a problem with it. Or they had, even 80 or 90,000 miles, they started having bad shifting and weird behavior. Then they put the kit in and everything's back to like it was brand new. So, and like you said, you know, I'm sure there's scenarios where someone's going to buy your kit, their transmission's like maybe just already gone anyway.
Oh yeah.
Or they're to the point where it's like, no matter what you do to the valve body, you're probably toast. So, and they're going to blame you if they drain the fluid, they get all that clutch material out in the fluid, then they put your valve body in, fill it up with brand new fluid, and then they start having problems. Like, well, you may be toast anyway, you know?
You know, that's uncommon, but it does happen. You know, obviously when you serve tens of thousands of people, you know, over time, you know, even if 1% of them are crazies, that means you deal with hundreds of crazies. So
I tried to strip out the dumb questions.
ask me a dumb one.
No, there's people that say things like, I have a 2024 F-150 10R80. What valve body do I buy? And I'm like, they just,
A 6R80 valve body. No, I'm kidding. You know what I tell people like that? Do independent research and ask people to send you pictures of what they're upgrading. The aftermarket transmission industry has a pattern of telling people that they're upgrading things and then either not upgrading them or just buying like a $30 pack of cheapo parts from China on eBay and pretending that it's something marvelous and proprietary. Make them send you pictures. And if they even send you pictures, ask them, did you invent that modification or did you get it from a third party? What third party? I want to look up the part and see what I'm paying for. And then they say, oh, no, that's proprietary. Well, that's weird because it looks exactly like this part over here. That's $9 on eBay.
I see a lot of eBay check ball transmission parts too. I thought that was interesting.
Nice. Top shelf.
Yeah, right. One guy asked, he has a 2023 Mustang with the 10R80. He's trying to diagnose what he believes is a torque converter lockup issue. And he wondered if NextGen can help with that. But I'm guessing you guys aren't really a remote diagnostic company. But he said the dealer's been useless in helping him, which it's a pretty new rig.
Well, dealers are almost always useless. I would tell that person, give us a call, tell us what's going on. We can't be remote diagnosticians, but we guess right 95% of the time, if not higher. We know exactly what we're talking about. If you just tell us what's going on, what symptoms you're experiencing, if there's any codes, all that stuff, there's a very big chance we'll figure it out accurately because we deal with this every single day of the year and we design parts that fix whatever problem you have. So we can probably figure it out without access to the vehicle better than any dealership can with access to the vehicle.
Guy just purchased a 2025 LTZ Silverado 5.3 10-speed. He started noticing a slight chatter feel in his transmission, 800 miles, 1,000 miles. He said it's somewhere between 20 and 30 miles an hour.
No doubt.
And he's got the bumper to bumper, but it's kind of like the thing you said in the last video. Like, it's like Tommy Boy, you know, you got a guarantee on a piece of crap. You know, it doesn't really help you, doesn't fix the problem. So I'm assuming you're going to say upgrade your valve body and see how it goes.
You know how many people call us with stuff like that? They upgrade the valve body and they're like, dude, it feels better than new. Like, why do you think we tell people to do this? If you did this on day one, you would have never called us anyway. Here's what I'll tell you. The majority of, you know, vibrations or chatters in the lower speed area on 10 speeds, you know, the 15 to, you know, maybe 40 mile an hour range, most of that on the 10L80, 60, 80, 90, the 10 speed Allison's a little different, but on the 10L 60, 80, 90, like he has, if he has a 5.3 liter, is the TCC dampener. The TCC dampener is this small piston that ends up wearing out, and the oil used to turn the converter clutch on starts exiting. Well, if you look at where the hole is, it spits it out into the pan. So the oil doesn't get used to turn the clutch on anymore. And so in a partial lockup condition or something like that, this can result in a vibration or a square tire sensation. And the separator plates that I designed, yet again, here we go again, the separator plates we designed actually close all oil flow to that specific dampening circuit because it's not necessary. And so it's mechanically impossible for that to wear out and cause an issue if you use these parts because the parts no longer exist. They're permanently eliminated from the system. It would be like removing your EGR cooler and then somehow having an EGR problem. How can you have an EGR problem if you don't have an EGR?
So before you started NextGen, where did you work? Where did you get all your knowledge, your chemistry, all this stuff?
Dude, there's the whole backstory. I've loved science since I was a little kid. It's my whole world. I love science. And I know that science has been hijacked by political activists and things like that. I'm not, that's not what I want to be associated with. Science to me is the observation of fact in the pursuit of absolute truth, period. Whether you like it or you don't like it. Okay? That's what science is to me. And I love that, and it makes me happy. And I also love and become happy about cars. And eventually I started looking for a way for those two things to converge. And when I was in the Marine Corps, you don't make much money. And I started working on cars for money. And eventually I realized I could probably make a better part than the one I'm installing. And eventually I saved up enough money to try and execute on some of those ideas. And, one day at a time, I started testing and trying things. And, once I'd get done testing something, offer it for sale for people. And then I would take some of that money and try to design something else. And, 100 some inventions later, 10 years later, here's NextGen Drivetrain.
Awesome. Yeah, people ask, and they're always, it's interesting because it was funny. You sent me that text and you're like, you probably think I'm crazy. And it's like, well, yeah, but a little bit, but I think I'm crazy. Like everybody's got a little crazy, a little fire, but it's also everybody in the comments. It was interesting to see, like, they know you're not full of crap, because if I ask you a question, humans are great at detecting patterns and BS. And I think, 95, 100% of people in the comments are like, this guy knows what he's talking about. I can tell he knows what he's talking about, which is where trust comes. And then, and then it goes from there. And hopefully this will play out to the point where I don't know where manufacturers are going to go with this, but maybe they'll change. Maybe they'll just go back to at least getting cars through 100, 150,000 miles before they have problems, before 15% of them are failing. But I hope it makes some positive change. Although if it doesn't, I guess you'll do just fine selling these kits.
Look, man, as long as regulators continue to try and keep their hand in the automotive industry, and frankly, as long as the automotive industry has agency over the regulators, you're going to be messed up in both directions. The regulators mess things up because they implement unintelligent rules that don't work properly, that create problems. That's where the regulators are guilty. And these automotive companies are guilty because they use their access to resources to manipulate the market and to manipulate legislation so that they can continue to abuse people. You know why public transportation sucks in America? Because automotive companies send lobbyists to Washington to convince you to never pass a bill for any sort of public transportation improvement and take your freedoms away. They want you to be disenfranchised if you don't want to own a car, or maybe you just can't afford a car. Imagine how difficult that makes it on a young person, especially when my first car, I saved up a few $1,000s and I worked extremely hard for that. And I got a pretty nice Chevy Blazer. It was used, obviously, but what the hell car are you going to get for $4,000 in 2025 that's safe for a young person to even use? I mean,
Yeah.
The market is running away from people, and they're making sure that this happens. Just remember, there's a lot more freeways than sidewalks in most of this country, and most industrialized modern countries, it's the exact opposite. And the reason that is because the automotive lobby has abused our legislative system with money. They bribe our politicians, or for our MSNBC viewers out there, give them campaign contributions.
Yeah, it's a mess. Yeah. You were talking about something earlier, just about the cash for clunkers.
Yeah.
Man, that made me so angry when they did it.
Big
Because
scam.
it's like you're taking all of the. It was like this. They viewed these vehicles as bad because they're not pushing the limits of gas mileage, and it's just a scam. It's taking the actually was probably the most reliable vehicles off the road and then forcing people to buy. It's just forcing that consumerism.
I know. This is why I say get the government out of everything. I don't know what they're doing. Get them out of education, get them out of healthcare, get them out of all of it. Because you want to know something? They destroy everything they touch. No matter how much money we give to education, it gets worse.
Yeah.
You want to know why healthcare is so expensive? It's because they know that the government is going to foot the bill, so they can just charge any amount. Imagine if the government said, we'll pay for people's next-gen drivetrain transmissions if it goes over $10,000. Well, obviously, we're going to charge like $1 million a transmission because you guys are going to pay for it. Of
Yep.
course it's expensive. You want me to believe that the people who are in charge of the Department of Motor Vehicles should be in charge of my healthcare. What the hell is that?
Yeah.
And on the flip side, I understand privatization doesn't work either. It's resulting in CEOs getting gunned down in public by, charismatic Italian people from Pennsylvania. But I'm just being honest with you when I tell you, asking the government to save you has never worked. Never.
No. For all these manufacturers, the easy button would be spend $10 more on your separator plate and a little bit more on your valves. And you,
I know.
You never have these videos. You never have these problems. You're not going to get sued by, I guarantee class actions they're going to come out of this. Not this video, just the fact that 15% of people are having problems with their trucks under 100,000 miles. And when you start getting people to spend 70, 80, $100,000 on these trucks, they're a little more feisty to go after GM or whoever than they were when it was like a $35,000 truck,
Here's something you should know. Ford, look at their earnings reports, makes about $200 billion a year in top line revenue, but the company is worth less than $50 billion. That means that company's total market cap is right around 1/4 of 1 year's revenue. Why is this crazy? Publicly traded companies are usually worth multiple times, if not dozens of times, their annual revenue. But Ford is worth 1/4 of their own revenue. Why is their valuation so low rational to their income? In fact, this pattern exists for all mass market manufacturers, at least the domestic ones.
Yeah.
But why is their valuation so low? It's because they're terrible companies that no investor in their right mind would contribute to. This is a giant Ponzi scheme. If these companies did the right thing, it would be the financial end of them. They do not manage their funds correctly, and they do not make enough money to do the right thing. That's why they try to bully you through financing. That's why companies like Ford Motor Finance, Ferrari Financial, BMW Financial Services, that's where these things come from. There's more money in finance than selling cars. There's more money in maintenance and repair than selling cars. There's more money in parts than selling cars. So they make sure your car sucks, and then they get you on the financing, they get you on the parts, they get you on the service, the maintenance, the repair, they get you on everything else because the car doesn't make money, and the shareholders know that, and that's why they transact at 1/4 of their own revenue for a multiple of earnings. The companies are not worth anything because no investor with any brain matter would buy into one. They are Ponzi schemes, and they are permanently financially delinquent, in my opinion.
Yeah, and they'll just get bailed out if
Oh yeah,
they'll get taxpayer dollars if they behave even worse than they are now.
I know. Look what happened in 2008. Obama and his, Michael over there, right, determined that they were going to give all of this money to these big companies and save the day. And they're like, well, these are Americana brands. We got to save them. That's insane. I imagine what bigger welfare queen is there than a massive corporation? I want someone to tell me.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to end this. I appreciate your time, and I'm sure everybody will appreciate it.